It's been a little bit dormant. Now, the recent news we covered, Charlie Morton signed with the Orioles here, and there's the veteran. And when you look at it, of the veterans that were available, it made sense.
Mhm.
But the one thing that we were constantly hearing was, well, wait a minute, well, that can't just be the move. And we've all spoken on this before. I've been very adamant. I do believe something else is in the works. And clearly, so do some other people around the national headlines and national spotlight of the baseball conversation. And friend of the show, friend of the program, Jon Morosi was on earlier talking about the Baltimore Orioles being interested with a certain pitcher out in Seattle still with Luis Castillo. So let's play that clip for you guys.
Possibility that the Mariners would move Luis Castillo to get a bat, or at least clear some payroll space to then be able to sign a bat, maybe even like a Pete Alonso if they're able to move the entirety of Castillo's contract. A couple complicating elements there, however. Number one, he has a full no-trade clause, and number two, it's a lot of money that he's got on his contract, and we are now approaching a later stage of the offseason to where not a ton of teams can take on the entirety of Castillo's deal comfortably in terms of the overall payroll spot. But Harold said this, and Harold Reynolds, as he often is exactly right, that the Baltimore Orioles and Seattle Mariners have talked before and in recent days about a potential Castillo trade to Baltimore where a younger bat would go to Seattle. That is completely accurate. Now, we don't know if necessarily if the willingness of Baltimore to take on Castillo's money has dropped a little bit because they've now added both Morton and Sugano. But Harold was spot on, and I also believe, Lauren, that Nolan Arenado, as the options for him start to dwindle, especially if Boston signs Alex Bregman, Seattle might be the last best option if he's going to get traded to a contender and not start the season in St. Louis.
All right, so there's John explaining that it still could be a possibility, and a lot of things have changed, right? The Orioles, obviously, you signed Charlie Morton, you go and get Sagano, who comes over from Japan, and yes, they are older pitchers there, and people are going, well, wait a minute, that doesn't really move the needle. Then you also signed Tyler O'Neill, you signed Gary Sanchez. So you're sitting here and going, is this feasible? Well, the answer is yes, it is feasible. But what are you willing to give up for Castillo? And then are you willing to take on the contract? And then above all, is he going to want to come here? Because he has final say. Hey, do I want to make this move? So a lot of different factors, but I would tend to believe that there is definitely interest. Now, if a deal is going to get done, I don't know. I really don't know with that. But that is the one guy here, guys. If we're going to sit here and dissect the Orioles trading for a Dylan Cease or trading for a guy like Castillo, you might as well make sure that you're going to have that guy under contract for X amount of years, because if you go and get Dylan Cease, there's the same factor that he goes to free agency. Castillo, the beauty of it is if you're willing to take on the money, you have him under contract. Now, again, if there is still interest there. But fellas, I mean, Zach, I can start with you. I think this is the one move that fans, for Oriole fans, they would be excited about. And I think that they want to see something. I think, is that fair to say? They want to see some sort of move like this, whether or not it actually happens.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is, man, do Oriole fans, especially Orioles Twitter, the people you see commenting daily, they just want to see that move. And I think this would be that move. To a lot of people, listen, it's Luis Castillo that he was in his heyday with the Reds when he first got to Seattle. No, but every pitcher has that slight regression. I think this is a great opportunity, obviously, depending on who you would give up. I think it solidifies the Orioles rotation. I think the rotation as it is has potential and is set up very well for regular season success. Talking about, Charlie Morton coming in to eat innings. You have guys like Sagano coming in who also is known to eat innings, kind of those veterans that we felt they were lacking last year. The one thing with Castillo that I feel like is it brings in another top of the rotation arm for those moments when you go into October, when you want to have the Grayson Rodriguez's, the Zach Eflins, the Luis Castillos step up and show their worth. That's why you're getting a guy like Castillo. I think it makes too much sense. I've been pounding on this door pretty much all offseason that the Mariners and Orioles need to make a deal. It just makes too much sense for what each team needs and what each team has an abundance of. This deal needs to get done. I'm not sure who is included for Baltimore. I think it would probably be potentially Mountcastle. You could see a Kerstead involved in the deal. But like you said, I think Castillo, he also has years where he's under contract, I believe 2 more years after this one. So I think Castillo to Baltimore seems like the trade that's going to happen. But, I think overall the Mariners and Orioles need to be talking.
Yeah, I agree. I like the Luis Castillo to Baltimore. I just don't know if I like what the Orioles would have to give up for him. Like if I'm going to go after a Mariners pitcher, like Castillo's probably not at the top of my list, depending on who they're looking for. If you're looking for a big bat, I mean, Mountcastle could be that guy. Obviously, Kerstad's not exactly proven, but we know what he's had, what kind of potential he has. Luis Castillo is 32 years old. He had a great year last year. I'm not taking anything away from the fact that we could use a Luis Castillo, but is he that ace that has now that void right now that the Orioles have is an ace? There isn't one. Does Luis Castillo fill that Corbin Burns void? I just don't know if he does. And if the Orioles are looking for that, then maybe Luis Castillo is not that guy.
Yeah, I don't think he is that ace. Go, Ryan.
No, so here's my thing. A couple things. For Castillo, you got to ask yourself: if you want to move that has control, it makes the most sense there. But also the Mariners are still trying to win right now. So if you're going to make a move and you're going to give up some pieces, they're going to want pieces that are going to help the Mariners now. So prospect-wise, they're going to want some of those guys. The cease we just talked about where you can be caught up in that limbo. I see people talking about Pablo Lopez. I see no reason why the Twins, who when we sat down with Derek Falvey, the Twins president at the winter meetings, that said, yeah, we intentionally traded and gave up Luis Arraez because we wanted to extend and we identified Pablo Lopez. The Twins are still trying to win the AL Central. So you either have to find a candidate or a team that is either willing to give up a really solid player and pitcher for pieces right now. I'm trying to look at the only team, and honestly, and I mentioned this to you guys, if we're looking at free agency, the one piece where you could give up some of the talent and maybe it could be at the lower levels would have been Garrett Crochet. That was the one, but then you would have to get him to sign. And that was the second part of it. Now, we're not going to know that. The deal wasn't made, but you guys see my point there, right? The other part here, Kev, is, and this is something that Oriole fans aren't going to want to hear, there's a chance no move gets made. Yeah. And the reason why is because the Orioles technically have 7 or 8 options who could start. We'll run through that real quickly. So you're not going to have Bradish and Wells, so let's keep those out of there. But then who you do know you have, Grayson, Zach Eflin, Sagano, Charlie Morton. Who am I missing now? Kramer, Albert Suarez, Trevor Rogers,
Cade Povich,
and Chase McDermott. So you have 9 potential options in your rotation that you could use. So the question is going to be, do you put one of those guys in a trade, or do you say, you know what, we have enough depth right now, let's roll with this, and maybe we go and address the bullpen for one more, Kev? Because I think just, Kev, you have you guys, Kevin and Zach Reacts, you guys talk about the pulse of the fans. The fans just want to see a splash because why not, right? They want to feel that justification that we're making a move. But I do want to point out here, Kev, too, what happened last February when they made an acquisition for Corbin Burns. I would consider that one of the biggest splashes you could ever imagine.
Yeah, and I think it was one of the biggest splashes of the offseason for any team, especially kind of with how out of nowhere it ended up being. But I agree with you, Ryan, where it's like the Orioles have so many options. I still think they need to add an ace. I think that's in the best interest. Who
Yeah.
knows if that's going to actually happen or not at this point. But does this move open up the fact that maybe you could move on from one of those pitchers, or at least feel more comfortable moving on from one of the young guys if maybe a Seattle wants a win now bat and maybe a younger pitcher on top of that? Would that open up a move where they feel more comfortable trading Chase McDermott or Cade Povich? Now, we have to remember these one-year deals are one-year deals. So do you want to move off of a pitcher that I think has a lot of potential? Both those guys do. You're going to move off of that for all of a sudden you're opening up more rotation spots in 2026 because Morton and Sagano probably will not be there. Maybe they will, but I wouldn't count on it. So the splash move is what everybody wants, because I think also, we heard about, Bregman, is he going to go to Boston? Like, what's that going to look like? Yankees, they go out and they get freed after losing Soto and all these guys. Blue Jays really haven't done anything, although their first team were in on everybody. And then the Rays really haven't done a lot as well. But your competition has gotten better. And I think with the Orioles, I think it's a harsh reality that while losing Burns and the moves that they've made, they're not a better team currently than they were last year. Now, we still have time. The offseason is not over yet. But in reality, I think that a lot of fans just want that splash move because Zach and I have talked about this. They set the precedent of, hey, we're in on this thing with the Corbin move last offseason. And every offseason is different. The Orioles, I'm not saying they're not trying to go out there and get guys. It's not like they're sitting on their hands and saying, we're not doing anything. Let's just let everybody get better. They're trying, but there are a lot of other factors as well. But I know the disappointing thing for a lot of people this season has been, I guess, the lack of that splash.
Mm-hmm. And to point that out here, making a splash isn't going to dictate if your team is going to go and make a run. Now, I do know if you spend money and you have really good players, like the Dodgers are the one team that's just like in a league of their own. Monstars do what they want. The Padres spent a lot, but then they've started to change a little bit. And they actually, you could argue that they were a successful team. They played better this past year than they did with the expectations that they were World Series favorites. The Yankees had to make acquisitions because they don't have the farm system. Look at Kansas City, because Kansas City to me last year, you probably wouldn't look and say that they had this incredible starting rotation, but their young group plus who they brought in started to gel. They started to play well. The Detroit Tigers went on a bender of a run where there's a lot of players there that people probably still aren't even sure about.
They went on a run after trading Jack Flaherty.
So I think that's where people got to sit here and go. And I live and stand by my tweet the other day of people don't want to say this out loud, but it's the reality. You go as far as your core that you have, and your core is not just your young hitters. If Grayson Rodriguez and Dean Kramer take another step, your team's going to be better. If then Jackson Holiday and Colton Cowser and Jordan Westberg play at a better clip than they did this past year, you're going to be a better team. So there's so many other factors that go into this. And Brad, to your point is, do you want to – the last thing I'd want to see is overpaying if you're not fully sure on who you'd give up. I would not do that at all. If you are set on your guys that you want to see what's going to happen, then by all means roll with who you got.